So let me get started again. You are at the West Seattle Transportation Coalition's May virtual membership meeting. As I said before, down there on the screen, we do have a Facebook page where you can get all sorts of news updates on transportation relevant to West Seattle and the city of Seattle at West Seattle TC. And we also occasionally have some discussions there, so feel free to check that out. Quick review of tonight's agenda. We'll do some welcome and introductions and things from the top. We will discuss previous meeting minutes, which really there's a link that'll be available in the PowerPoint later that goes out to our the video recording of last month's meeting. It's kind of a mess to type in looking there right now. We will have our first group of guests. We'll have a conversation with Washington State Ferries about their long-range planning and as well as some of the mitigation strategies they might be looking at in terms of how they're impacted by the West Seattle Bridge closure. You can learn more at their website. That particular address goes to their long-range planning and publications page, and that'll show up on a later slide. We'll spend about 40 minutes talking about that before we transition into our second topic for the evening, which will be continuing our conversation that we began last month with Seattle and King County. We'll be getting, hopefully, some deeper details about the mitigation strategies they're looking at during the West Seattle Bridge closure. And you can find more information. We have links to Metro and King County Water Taxi. And then for those who do stick around after that, we will have, we're going to ask our board member Deb Barker to talk for 10 or 15 minutes about the recently announced West Seattle Bridge Community Task Force and the Technical Advisory Panel. I know I saw earlier that Marcy Carpenter is on the call. I know she's one of the people who's been named to the community task force, so if she wants to stick around and participate then, I'd certainly invite her to do so. And if anyone else has snuck in since we started, if you've been named to one of those committees, you'd be welcome to chat at that point as well. And then we'll quickly move through a little bit of old business and new business, although I'll call out right now for those who are not aware, the Lower Spokane Street Bridge will be closed at various points this weekend, and so we'll be talking a little bit of about that, and then we'll adjourn at 8:30. That's the quick overview. For those who have not been with us before, quickly, the purpose of the West Seattle Transportation Coalition. We're a peninsula-wide organization working to address transportation and commuting challenges for the nearly 100,000 people living and working on the West Seattle Peninsula. And we accomplish this by, doing outreach to residents on the peninsula, engaging elected officials at all levels, partnering with agencies on ideas and brainstorming and outreach, as well as trying to do our own engagement with businesses, community groups, special interest groups, and individuals here on the peninsula. We've been around for several years now, and we're one of the first groups that started reaching out to the community and discussing light rail options coming to the peninsula, which is how we got started here. Moving along, for those who want to know exactly what are we working on, these are the 6 top priorities we had originally identified for 2020. As you can imagine, the West Seattle Bridge Transportation Corridor, we are now a little bit more focused on detour routes, but that is still a big issue. Sound Transit 3 plans for light rail to West Seattle, Fauntleroy Way Boulevard project, which has been on hold at the moment, Delridge Way multimodal projects, and Rapid Ride H, which for those who are not aware, has a bunch of things happening very soon, starting construction on that project within the next several weeks here. As well as folks are probably aware, if you've managed to get in or on or off of the peninsula in the last couple of weeks, that a lot has been happening around Highland Parkway traffic control. It's amazing how after years and years and years, we can suddenly get all the attention and all of the quick speed of local agencies and elected officials when suddenly that becomes one of the only ways we can get on or off the peninsula. And finally, just sort of a general look at how do we improve transportation infrastructure to match Seattle's growth, which has been a big concern for us here in West Seattle. and we're seeing the impacts of that right now. So for those who, for those who have not been on a Zoom call before, you somewhere, depending on how you may have things set up, you may have to move your mouse to the top or bottom of the screen. But you should be able to put yourself on mute or unmute, stop your video or start your video. There are options to do a virtual background, as you'll see some of us have. You can also do a few other quick things there. And there should be an option, unless something has not been set up properly, to access the chat window. Hopefully Kate Wells, one of our fellow board members, will be helping us to moderate and look at those things as we go through. Folks who are on phones only, I apologize. We'll try to remember to pause at various points to unmute and give you chances to ask questions as well. And then keeping us moving here, just a quick pause. You know, we're all doing a whole lot of meetings right now, but just a quick reminder on etiquette for, you know, especially since we're a large public meeting. It looks like we've got about 70 people participating at the moment. You know, we do ask, you know, I did say we are recording and it's obviously up to you, but, you know, if you are going to be speaking at any point, you know, it's nice to turn on your camera so we can see you, say hi. It says selectively mute, off to listen on to speak. At least for the initial parts, we'll mostly be turning over to our speakers and letting them talk. So I'll be pretty aggressively muting anybody who starts talking while our guests are doing. You know, be present as much as possible. We've asked our guests to come and give their time, some of them, you know, as part of their work, even though we're getting into the evening. So try and, you know, be here listening to what they're saying and not missing parts of their presentation, because that's just, you know, we appreciate it. And above all, have a good time and use the chat and enjoy just the chance to be learning more about what's going on in our community and participating in that. And so moving quickly into introductions, you know, we're not gonna pause for everybody to introduce themselves. That would take too long. So we'll ask people, you know, if you're interested and willing to go over to that chat window, share your name, share the neighborhood you're from. My name is Michael Taylor Judd. I'm from North Delridge. You know, if you want to share, if there are things that additional things you want to share, pronouns, I use he, him, his. If you have particular access needs, if there's something where, you know, you won't be able to see, you aren't able to see the presentation, or you have something a question that you want asked, but you have to leave early. If there are things that you want to add over there that hopefully myself or Kate will catch, you know, that's what I sort of mean by access needs. And then, you know, where do you normally commute to? We're all going to be talking tonight about how we go on and off the peninsula. Are most of us going to downtown? Are you going to Bellevue? Are you heading south towards Tukwila? You know, where is it that you're going? And, you know, just kind of help us share a little bit about each other. And then finally, and I believe there is an option to do a private chat, but, you know, we're always trying to remember, we're on so many different, I'm sure all of us on so many different platforms, and it's hard to remember what is and isn't available on each platform. If we do have a private chat option here, if you want to be added to our WSTC email list, just send a private chat message to John Wright, who's one of our board members, with your email. And if I am totally mistaken and private chat is not an option here in Zoom, and only in, I don't know, Teams or Skype or any of the other places we're all showing up, you know, we'll make sure to give options you could send to info@WestsideSeattleTC.org as well. That's info@WestsideTC.org. And just say, hey, I'm new and I'd love to get added to your email list. And so unless there's some critical question that we need brought to our attention, Kate. Oh yes, good. I can see now we do have private chat options. Awesome. Is there any information in particular we need to bring up before we move forward, Kate?
Nope, I think we're good.
Alrighty, great. Then, oops. Okay, I had said we were going to, so before we get to that, I had said we were going to pause for minutes, and I forgot to slip another slide in here. I will mention we do not currently have any written minutes to approve. Is that correct, Kate?
Yep, correct.
All right, so we may be throwing some notes together, but for folks who want to know what we were doing at our last meeting in April, we do have a recording that's made available. I believe the West Seattle blog also posted it as well as another location you can see as well as on our website. And again, if somebody's looking for that, just drop a note in the group chat, and one of our board members will make sure to get that to you. So without further ado, and pretty much on time. All right. We are going to get underway with our first discussion, which again is a conversation with Washington State Ferries about long-range planning and mitigation strategies during the West Seattle Bridge closure. We have John Vezina joining us tonight, who's Director of Government Relations with Washington State Ferries. We have Hadley Rodero, Strategic Communications Manager with Washington State Ferries, and then they'll be doing a bit of a presentation. And then when we get into some of the discussion, we've also asked Bill Wellington to join us, who's a board member with the Fauntleroy Community Association, just to offer us a little bit deeper perspective on that neighborhood's concerns and long time understanding with having a Washington State Ferry dock right there in their neighborhood. So I am going to stop sharing here for a moment so that we can let Hadley load up her PowerPoint presentation, and then we'll get underway.
Thanks, Michael. Just two quick things before we start with the PowerPoint, or maybe two and a half. One, I don't think anyone's ever threatened to capture and preserve me before, so I appreciate you saying that as we get started. And Hadley and I are really excited to do this. We were part of Washington State Ferry's Triangle Task Force. We were two of the lead staffers on that. So I think we have a fairly good understanding of the issues that Fauntleroy faces. So we're really interested to hear, the broader ideas and perspectives of people in West Seattle. I know this is a really challenging time, and it's difficult because Hadley and I are both kind of positive. How can we figure things out? And as we'll talk about in a minute, we've got some constraints at Ferries at the moment, but excited to hear the kind of ideas and thoughts you all have. And then secondly, in my role as government relations director, I deal with a lot of legislators and city and county folks. And I would just like to start by letting you all know, if you don't already, how well represented you are. Before I think even the public brought it up, I had heard from Councilmember Herbold's office, from Senator Wynn and Representatives Fitzgibbon and Cody about, what can you guys do? How can you help? This is going to be a real issue. So have no fear that to the extent you're communicating with your elected officials, they are communicating with us. And likewise, the good work you've done. I woke up this morning to KUOW telling me about this meeting, and the West Seattle blog does such a great job in covering issues in West Seattle. I was reading the comments people have been making there. So, you all are doing a great job, and your representatives are doing a good job. So thank you for the invitation. Just to kind of go over a little bit about the route so that you know about our service. The Fauntleroy-Vashon Southworth route, the Triangle, we had just over 3 million total riders last year. And as you'll see, a big portion of that was vehicles. About every 7 years, we do an origin and destination study so we can better understand where our customers are coming from and where they're going. The last one that we did in 2013 showed that, so it's due to be updated, showed that about 60% of ferry customers going through Fauntleroy were not going downtown. A lot of them are going to West Seattle, some going south to Burien and to White Center and other places. So as we look at this and how many of those trips that we're doing daily, really a small percentage of those would be going to downtown Seattle. So as we're looking at this and talking certainly to SDOT, who's a great partner, and Kitsap Transit and King County Metro, we try to quantify the numbers we're talking about, and that of those daily trips over the bridge, are passengers who would be going to Seattle, and therefore as we consider some of the suggestions we've heard about direct service from Vashon or Fauntleroy to Seattle, a lot of, 60% of those people would not be wanting to get on that ferry. They would be wanting to go to other places. Hadley, do you want to move? One of the biggest constraints we have right now is that Coleman Dock, our busiest dock, is being renovated and upgraded. It has horribly old timber. It's an old structure. It would not be built today with the materials that it was built with in the past. Part of our community commitment as we started this project in 2017, it goes till, it's 2018, and it goes till 2023, is not to cancel any sailings. So this project would probably cost half as much and take half as long if we could have just closed it down. But we told the people of Bainbridge and Bremerton, especially Bainbridge, our busiest route, that we would not cancel any sailings during the construction. So right now we've torn down part of the old terminal and rebuilt a third of the former size for our passengers to use. So it's already a challenge. This week we had to run late sailings because we had an issue with one of our slips. It is a constant challenge for us just to maintain keeping those boats going from Bainbridge and Bremerton. So as we consider how we would add another boat coming from the Triangle route, that's a real challenge to us. Secondly, the Fauntleroy terminal, as those of you who have ever traveled through it, it was built in 1957 when we had smaller boats, obviously less passengers. It'll hold about 80 cars. Right now we have 124 vehicle vessels assigned to the route. So already we have trouble just getting, we can fill the boat, but we often during rush hour already have more than capacity waiting for the next boat. So figuring out how we would get people from Fauntleroy to Seattle on that dock, which is scheduled to be redone sometime in the future, would be challenging. And then just sort of inside baseball stuff, 2 years ago we had 23 vessels. Because of their age, and I'm happy to answer questions if people want to ask about that, but we have had to retire 2 vessels, one last year, one this year. So we currently have 21 vessels. In our normal summer, which this we'll get to in a minute, this will not be, 19 of those have to be in service to run our schedule, and with 2 in maintenance, because we have to have boats in maintenance in the summer. We don't have enough maintenance time not to do that. So we currently don't have a spare vessel that we could drop in and just add service. So we would have to minimize service somewhere else in order to add this kind of service. And additionally, we don't have the funding, especially now, which I'll go into, as I said, in a minute, to add additional crewing. Really, the cost of operating our boats is labor costs. Fuel it's a cost, but it's not super expensive. It's that crewing that we would need to take and put on a new route that would be a challenge. As we look at any time, and people have brought up really pointedly, and it's something I learned, that in the past when we've had to do construction, we have temporarily for a few days or a couple of weeks rerouted passengers to Seattle from Fauntleroy. To do something bigger than that, we are required by RCW to do public outreach. And we spent 2 years on the Triangle Task Force doing, helping people understand our constraints, hearing from the public about it, just to change that weekday schedule. So the outreach we would be required to do to not only change the Triangle schedule, but to also probably change the Bainbridge and Bremerton schedules, because there's no way we could keep their schedule while adding service during the construction would be difficult. And then as the slide said, the crossing times are considerably longer. So one of the unintended consequences could possibly be that with those crossing times and 60% of the people not coming from Seattle, you would be adding lines at Fauntleroy of people waiting for boats as we were on 2-boat schedule when things were busier. So, you know, as I said, you know, these are just some of the considerations we have to take into account, and frustrating for those of us who would like to be more proactive in the short term in helping, but things that we have to consider. You know, I've threatened some of my colleagues I'm going to start a drinking game every time someone says the new normal, but we are in the new normal at the moment. And for those of you who don't ride our boats as much, we have 4 seasons of service, with obviously the summer being when we have those 19 boats in service. In the winter, we have 17, allowing us to do maintenance on the others. So because of our decrease in passengers, we have done a couple of things. One, we've extended that winter schedule through June 20th, which would have been the normal end of the spring schedule. We've also, Bainbridge and Bremerton both usually have 2 boats. They're on 1. And the Triangle route usually has 3. It's on 2. And additionally, we have canceled the last round trip sailing on each of those routes, as well as 2 others, to allow us to do some more time for deep cleaning. So ridership is still down about 65%. As counties open, and I think Kitsap County is about to go to phase 2 probably soon, we are seeing a slight uptick. But as we think about our service moving forward, the calendar is no longer, as probably a lot of you are experiencing, the calendar no longer means much. We're going to be looking at 4 metrics as we try to restore service: ridership levels, crew availability, and right now, you know, following the governor's good direction for people who are in the high risk group, people over 65 or with underlying health conditions, we have reached out to our employees, and we have an aging workforce who are in that high risk, and offered them opportunities to telework, to do training and other special projects, teleworking, or to take leave. The CARES Act and other state programs allow employees to take leave. We now have so many employees of that high risk group doing that we could not return to normal service tomorrow. Even if the governor announced tomorrow that he was moving quickly to later phases, we do not have the crewing now, and likely won't until later in the summer, that we could do that. In the same way, and this is sort of just so you understand our short-term constraints, we don't have vessel availability at the moment. When construction and maintenance was shut down, we had to close our Eagle Harbor maintenance facility, and we pulled a boat out of the Vigor shipyard that we were working on. And so it won't be until at least the first week of June that we even would have the vessels to return a boat to the Triangle route or the Bainbridge Bremerton route. And as I said, even then, crewing would be an issue. And then fourth, and not least, as legislators would tell you, is our budget. You can imagine 70% of our operating costs are covered by fare box recovery. That is obviously with 65% ridership down, that we are taking a significant hit to ridership. When you look at WSDA as a whole, which we're part of that budget, there's no tolling, there's very little tolling, gas tax, the fees that come from rental cars. So as we consider service, we have to also look at our budget. And it's clear that when you look at those 4 metrics, there is not going to be anything like normal service. I'd also add to that, I'm hearing anecdotally from legislators and others that a lot of folks have learned that there's no reason to get up at 5 a.m. and catch a bus or a ferry to get to Seattle to work. They're going to be teleworking from now on. And in fact, I've seen a couple of law firms who've told their folks that until there's a vaccine, they don't expect their employees to come back to work. And so they'll be teleworking for the next year plus. So we're not exactly sure what ridership is going to look like coming out of this. We know from looking at other states that people are not just jumping back into things. They're being cautious even if their elected officials aren't. So, you know, this is kind of a new part of what we're dealing with in the short term that would be a challenge to adding service. Although, you know, as we look forward in the long term, we want to keep talking to you all and SDOT and the transportation agencies to see where we might be able to help. And then, you know, someone in some of the emails back and forth about this meeting, there'd been a conversation about the long range plan. Every decade or so, we update our long range plan. We did that at the end of 2018 for 2040. As you look at the next two slides, I'll just say that unfortunately, none of this is probably relevant anymore. You know, that plan was done based on ridership that my planning colleagues tell me will probably never come back. You know, we know that when we say invest in 16 new vessels, that's not to add service, that's just to maintain the service we've got. That's a preservation issue, but there's lots of preservation issues in the state that are going to be, the governor and the legislature will be having to look at. So that total cost of $14.6 billion over 20 years is going to be daunting. We do want to invest in new technologies and find out ways to better communicate and serve our passengers. And then we're really excited that for the new vessels that we build, and then for our 3 largest and most polluting vessels, the governor and the legislature have directed us to make those hybrids, and that'll reduce fuel emissions, noise, and maintenance costs. So, you know, to the extent we're able to build new vessels, you'll see those coming online. Specifically in the long range plan to the Triangle route, we have 3 124 car vessels there to help kind of alleviate some of those traffic problems. We'd had a 90 car vessel there before, so we're able to clear the dock a little bit more. And you know, in the future, we'll be electrifying the 3 terminals there. The Fauntleroy terminal replacement is really important as we see not only its size, and you know, we'll work with the neighborhood because I know there's real concerns there about how we update this dock, but with climate change, this is one of our lowest docks and we will have to replace it before it floods. And it is not seismically safe for a larger earthquake. And so, you know, we were just geared up. We were talking to folks there, we were ready. Frank Immel and Gary Dawson and others, and Chuck Sawyer, those in the community whom we work with all the time, we were really excited to start this project. And then with I-976 and now this, that we've had to slow our roll a bit, but it's definitely something that's there for the future. And then last is, as it says there, as this route gets busier, adding summer and winter service hours with those 3 bigger vessels. So with that, again, Hadley and I would like to thank you. And Michael, I don't know how you usually do this. If you want to monitor the chat, which would be great, and ask us questions, Hadley and I kind of tag team, and so we may both answer. Or if you want Hadley to ask me, whatever's best for you all.
We do have a couple of questions in the chat. Do you want me to go ahead and just read those?
That would be great as far as I'm concerned.
Okay.
Okay.
Let's see. One person, Claire Vanderberg, is asking about a water taxi from Fauntleroy to downtown, just a foot ferry. Is that sort of thing a possibility?
So 2 things to that. One, we are precluded by law from operating foot ferries. So that's a better question for the city and for King County Metro. As I said, the dock is really a constraint there. It would not only be, you know, how we often have a vessel waiting offshore trying to come in with our schedule when we are running 3 boats there. So it might be a challenge of how you sneak that passenger ferry in, but we will absolutely keep working with the city and the transit agencies if that's something they want to pursue to see what we might be able to do.
Okay, and I've also got a question from Joel Sparrow. Is it possible to use the 3rd slip at Coleman Dock for the new bow loading fast passenger-only ferry from Southworth.
So I know that Kitsap County is actively looking, they are supposed to be getting a new boat, which has also, I think, been delayed by COVID and the manufacturer on Whidbey Island that they're using. I know they're actively looking for new spaces to provide for that. I don't think, while we're under construction, we wouldn't be able to help. And but we keep talking to them too. But I think, if I understand correctly from the last thing I saw, they're looking at other options.
Right, and during construction, as John mentioned earlier, until 2023, we don't have 3 slips operating at Coleman Dock. So we're working with 2 slips during construction.
Thanks, guys. And I want to encourage folks to add questions in the chat. If it's something that's really long and complicated, a good way for us to stage, just let us know in the chat that you'd like to ask a question, and we can unmute you to ask the question verbally as well. I also want to make sure we give a chance, I don't know if Bill wanted to add in any information from the Fauntleroy community perspective and the long community stakeholder support you guys have done here with Washington State Ferries.
Yeah, so we've been working pretty closely with Ferries around the terminal replacement project and around other concerns in our area. One of the things that I'm interested in knowing, and John, maybe you have an answer for this, but when is Ferries next planning on counting? At the beginning of this, you pointed out that 60% of folks go south, and that means 40% go north. So when is the next time you guys plan on executing that count? Because I know just from living here that the difference in traffic between, say, 2012 and today is quite remarkable. And so I suspect that while your numbers were accurate at the time, that they might not be so representative today.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I should have mentioned you as one of the good folks we're working with at Fauntleroy. You guys have been so good because I know there's some anxiety about this new terminal update. So thank you for the work you've done on that. It would be time now in the regular course of action to start looking at that. And I know it's something my planning colleagues had started to look at. But now with it's a fairly large effort to do that, because of course it's a system-wide study. So that and everything else we're doing at the moment is on hold. But I think your point is well taken, and it's something that when we have the resources to do, we need to focus on.
I would suggest that, while I understand that's a system-wide study, I would suggest that there might be benefit in performing that study just at Fauntleroy, as if we get out of this this stay-at-home order and as ridership increases. Because I think if the numbers are what I think they are, which is approximately the opposite of what you suggest, that's going to be a problem for the bridge closure, right? I mean, I think that information sooner than later to deal with the bridge closure is going to be important. But.
Okay, yeah, well, I'll definitely talk to my planning colleagues. I honestly don't know how, we have no resources at the moment. So I don't know how much it would take to begin that process, and how valuable, like how long would we have to wait for phases to go so that we are getting an accurate count of what was actually happening and again, we don't know who's coming back on our ferries. We don't know, how much traffic there will be.
Yeah, I hear that. There's a lot of unknown ahead of us.
Yeah.
All right, Bill, I'm going to put you on mute for the moment. Kate, do we have some more questions that have been coming in? Oh,
Kate, you're
there
muted.
you are. Yeah, got to unmute there. There we go. Oh, no, not yet.
No, there
There
we
we
go. Sorry, I was trying to do the fancy space bar thing. It's not working for me. Okay, so Tom is seconding Bill that the ferries seem to be offloading with the majority heading north, easily 70% versus south off of the ferry. So just seconding that, that observation. And from Michael Sparazza, sorry if I'm butchering your name. What about the data from the university study?
So the University of Washington has done a couple of studies on the route, but you know, I was really involved with them on all of that, and I don't think it provided anything that would change. You know, they certainly didn't do an origin and destination study. It was more focused on the constraints at Fauntleroy. So I don't think it provides anything that would be helpful for this effort.
Right. Okay. I've also got from Deb Barker, passenger ferries, are they precluded by county or state law?
State.
Okay.
It's at a time that we used to be in that business, and we got legislative direction to focus instead on, you know, vehicle walk-on, not the foot ferries. And so that's why you see counties like Kitsap County voting to tax themselves to have to start their own service, and why King County does, because it's not a service you know, that we can provide. And you know, just honestly, it would be a big challenge for us to be able to you know, with the resources we have, aging workforce and our aging vessels, that it would take a substantial state investment to have us return to doing passenger only, and I just don't see that in the immediate future.
Can I ask a follow-up
Okay.
question on that,
Sure.
John? And this, my hunch is no, but I need to ask it. Does WSF ever let non-WSF boats dock at their facilities, i.e., well, non-WSF boats dock at their facilities?
Hadley, can you think of a case? I cannot think of a case when.
Is there anything that precludes it?
Well, we have historically, in extenuating circumstances, such as a number of years ago when the Port Townsend Coopville route had ferries that needed to be pulled from service, and we used some private ferry operators that provided some service at peak times there. So I mean, there's nothing that precludes that. But again, as John mentioned earlier, the constraints at our facilities are such that there's really not time to bring another boat in and out and offload and unload another boat with the current configuration. But there's nothing that would preclude us allowing somebody to use that facility, you know, statutorily.
And you know, we worked in concert with King County to build the passenger-only ferry at Coleman Dock. I know we're working with Kitsap Transit to do that at Southworth. So, you know, we do have that history of, you know, where we can, working with local transit agencies to do the passenger-only ferries. So those examples, I mean, they're not exactly using our terminal, and we still have to figure out what we're going to do at Southworth. But, you know, Southworth has a lot less service than you know, Fauntleroy and Vashon, which are certainly the focus of the Triangle route.
Thank you.
Okay, from Marty Westerman, are you encouraging Southworth vehicle travelers to head north to Bremerton or south to the Narrows, depending on where they're going? So, you know, we're part of the state highway system, so we can advise people on, you know, delays and those things. We cannot, you know, it's just like if you want to be on I-5 when there's a closure, you can ride on I-5 and wait. So we will definitely be sending passenger alerts out, you know, when there are delays and things. But one of the things I learned when Vashon people would ask during the Triangle Task Force about, you know, we're an island and we need this capacity.
people in Southworth can drive around. Well, for folks on Southworth to get to Bremerton, it's a 45-minute drive and then an hour ferry ride. And, you know, and then for those going south, the Tacoma Narrows Bridge, I think people do take that when they can, but it really, we discovered, adds a lot of time to their commute. So you know, that one of the things we'll be monitoring, and back to the point earlier about origin to destination, we just don't know not only who's going to go back to work, but with the bridge situation, how many people are going to choose to go other ways, or say to their boss, I need to telework until the bridge is back. You know, that's something we'll obviously be monitoring.
Right, and our
Tag on to
customer,
that. Okay.
I was just going to add that our customer service team has been, as part of our partnering with SDOT and other agencies, sharing out messages even already about the West Seattle Bridge closure, and will continue to do that so our customers can make their own choices. And I think a lot of them are savvy enough, especially from Southworth, where they have multiple choices, to look at travel times and make the decision that will result in the shortest trip for them. And if that ends up being Bremerton or driving around once traffic returns, you know, I'm sure they will avoid driving to West Seattle if they can find a faster way.
Yeah.
And to tag onto that, is there capacity, if times were normal, would there be capacity on the Bremerton ferry for a few people?
You know, it's largely time of day. It's busy early in the morning, and that's an hour crossing, so you see people leaving there very early. So, I mean, there's capacity. You know, people would just self-select of when they had to get to work and go earlier. As I said earlier, it's going to be fascinating coming out of this to see how many people in Kitsap County who've learned they can telework do. But we know there are lots of, you know, socioeconomically, the differences between Bainbridge and Bremerton. You know, we know there are a lot of folks who in Bremerton who rely on those jobs who probably don't have an option to telework.
John, one other question. Does this make the Kitsap Foot Ferry question moot, or is there a way to get the Kitsap Ferry started a year earlier to carry foot passengers direct and avoid using vehicles to come into Fauntleroy?
I think the issue there is them actually physically having a ferry to do it. It's being built, and I know there have been some delays there. I don't think they have the capacity to add that service right now.
When do you think that they could?
Hadley, do you remember? I think it's been pushed to early next year.
Yeah.
I believe that's their latest, and I know they're in discussions with King County, who manages and owns that passenger-only facility adjacent to our facility at Coleman Dock, about how that would work with them adding a new service coming into that facility. So there's the passenger-only terminal, and then there's our terminal where the car ferries come in next door, and they need to work that out.
So it sounds like COVID and the bridge failure are giving Kitsap a breathing room.
Kate, I see we've got a bunch more questions stacking up there in the window.
Yep. I'll lump these two together because they're tied together. What is, from Deb Barker, what is the timing of the Fauntleroy dock replacement? And then Ron asks, in planning for the Fauntleroy dock replacement, will it be enlarged to accommodate more vehicles? And will a second dock be added so the boats aren't waiting every day to dock?
So I'll answer the second part and I'll leave the first part to Hadley. We have no preconceived notions. We know the dock has to be updated. I was emailing with Frank Immel, the chair of the Fauntleroy Ferry Advisory Committee this week. You know, there's runoff from that because it was built in 1957, and there's environmental reasons. As I said, it's very low. So we need to update the dock. You know, if we had the space and the community wasn't concerned, our current design standard is a vessel and a half of holding. But we know that that's probably untenable to the good folks of Fauntleroy. So we're going to have a years-long environmental process that has mandated community outreach. and we'll be talking to people on all 3 routes, but especially the people in Fauntleroy. So there is no certainty that it will have increased holding. We need to build a seismically safe, higher dock that's environmentally more responsible than would have been 60 years ago. And after that, it will all be informed by the process. Hadley, do you want to talk about the process moving forward?
Well, the process is, John alluded to this earlier. We were right on the cusp of launching this big multi-year planning and environmental review process for that project. And all of this started. We were literally going to be having public meetings, right now. So we're taking another look at that schedule. We have a great consultant team on board. We have a lot of energy internally to look at the core preservation needs of that dock, the aging timber pile, the seismic needs, and then all the other opportunities that come with replacing that terminal that we've heard over the years from Ferry riders and from the Fauntleroy neighbors that could go into this project. And we're taking basically the word we like to use at the moment is pivot, and deciding what do we need to do given this new uncertainties with the West Seattle Bridge closure and with the COVID-19 situation. What's the responsible thing to do with the taxpayer dollars and with our planning process? There's opportunities that come there because there may be less traffic passing through there, but that also makes the planning challenging. How do you plan for something when you don't know exactly who's using it and that kind of thing? So more to come on that in the summer and fall, and we'll be launching that project. We just don't know exactly at what scale and exactly when at the moment.
And just to tag onto that, as Hadley was saying, nothing will happen until we meet with the community. That's
Right.
our first step. We're not having secret plans. We're not having ideas. We
Right.
are going to sit down and talk to the community repeatedly before we move forward on anything.
Exactly. And what we're discussing right now internally as part of this pivot is when is the right time to begin engaging the community in such a large effort with a lot of different perspectives and stakeholders. Right now, I think everyone's kind of burned out on meetings on Zoom, and would that be the right way to launch something like this where we want a lot of community engagement? So we're trying to figure out the right timing, and this audience right here will be probably one of our first places that will come to talk about that when it gets started.
So you couldn't commit to saying we'll do all the planning and as long as it takes, but any of the construction will wait until the bridge is restored? Could you commit to anything like that?
Well, that's part of what we're discussing in terms of timing, because again, as John said, the planning requires input from the community, and
I realize that.
So yes, that it will happen, and the timing we'll be getting going soon, but we're just taking a pause at the moment to sort of figure out what's the responsible approach to take.
Deb, I would be surprised if we could get to construction before there's something better about the bridge.
Well, with it 2 years to years, yeah, I hear you. That's it'd be nice to have it acknowledged that the construction will wait for the bridge, but I hear you need to meet with the public.
Thanks, you get it. You said it better than I did.
Right.
All right, we've got just a couple minutes left here, and I'm going to, let's see, I'm going to ask everybody to sort of hold. If you haven't been in the chat, there's a little bit of robust chatting happening there. Very, very good on all of you. About some things with foot ferries and where they can go and who runs them and all that sort of stuff. And I know we'll get to that with our second round of guests, but I do know we've got a handful of people who are on the phone only. So I'm gonna take a moment right now. Be aware if you're just audio only, I'm unmuting phones right now. So if there is someone there on the phone who's got, a burning question you wanna get in, now is your chance to sort of ask that question. All right, I'm not hearing anything, and it looks like I got all the phones. So,
And Michael, if I could just say as we wrap up,
yes.
none of us at Ferries want this to be like, oh, we checked that box, we met with the Transportation Coalition. We want to keep talking to you. You all know, Hadley has our comms email address there. You know how to get a hold of Hadley and me. So if there are follow-up questions or suggestions, we certainly hope you'll reach out, because we do want to keep talking and seeing as some of our constraints lessen, and as the ones that could, and as we see how riders actually adapt to what happens after we reopen, let's keep talking.
All right. Thank you very much. For those who are on the phones or unable to see video, that email address is WSFComms, COMMS, at wsdot.wa.gov. That's the acronym WSF for Washington State Ferry Comms at washdot.wa.gov. So a nice, silent wave your hands applause for our first round of guests there. Thank you very much. I'm going to mute everyone here for the moment. Again, you will have the option to mute yourselves, and we'll take just a second here as I stop that sharing and we bring up our PowerPoint here again. There we go. All right, so hopefully everyone can see. So moving along with the agenda, we are continuing our conversation with Seattle and King County about mobility during the West Seattle Bridge closure. Buses, van pools, water taxis, rideshare. I feel like saying, oh my. I need to add a little bit of explanation to the slide here. So we do have joining us this evening, Chris Arkills, who's Government Relations with King County Metro. We have Melissa Bailey, who's Policy Advisor to King County Council Member Joe McDermott. We did have Heather Marks, Director of Downtown Mobility, which I know many of us are familiar with. She regretfully had to back out very last moment due to some personal family things, and so we wish her and her family well. I believe we might have Michael Harold, Director of Communications from SDOT. So Michael, if you are here, let us know. If not, that's obviously fine. And then we do have Newell Aldrich on the call as well from Seattle City Council Member Lisa Herbold's office. And there's a question mark there as well. Like, not putting you on the spot, Newell, that you need to do or say anything, but just letting you know that if you do have information to share, either on Council Member Lisa Herbold's behalf or anything to offer in terms of City of Seattle things, feel free to chime in. And then again at the bottom there, for folks who want to learn more, there are links to Metro's pages and water taxi pages, which really, if you just go to kingcounty.gov and hit their transportation section, you can find lots of information on all sorts of different modes. I did not check in earlier. Chris or Melissa, did either of you have any sort of presentation or materials that you needed to share?
We do not have a fancy PowerPoint like our good friends at Washington State Ferry. Ready to have a robust conversation.
All right, we will just take it away. Do you have anything you need to share offhand, or are you ready to take questions?
Well, I just wanted to say to start, that the day after the bridge was closed, we formed an internal team at Metro to work on this. About half of that core team, myself included, live in West Seattle, which is a good thing. And we also started participating with twice weekly calls, including Washington State Ferries, SDOT, the Coast Guard, the Port of Seattle. I'm sure I'm WSDOT. I'm sure I'm missing a few, but the level of interagency coordination is pretty strong. I'm going to kind of take the lead on talking about what we're doing with the King County water taxi system, but I did want to give Melissa Bailey a chance to talk about how our King County Council member Joe McDermott's been involved. We've been trying to keep our elected officials who represent West Seattle up to date because we know they're all going to be important advocates in the future. So Melissa, if you want to take it away for a minute, I think that'd be great.
Sure. Thanks, Chris, and thanks everybody for having us and for being here. As Chris said, I'm Melissa Bailey with King County Council member Joe McDermott's office, and I think many of you know that in addition to serving on the County Council, he's also a Sound Transit board member. So when he first learned about the bridge, which was the same day as everyone else, some of his first thoughts were, how does this impact light rail? And can we increase the water taxi? So he's been getting regular updates and briefings from Metro, as well as has sat down with SDOT and with Peter Rogoff, the CEO of Sound Transit, and kind of encouraged collaboration between all agencies and has been really pleased with how they're working together. And so he's also been asked to serve on the West Seattle Bridge Community Task Force and has agreed to do that. So he's really eager to dig in and he's prepared to advocate for funding. So I look forward to working with all of you closely as the conversation kind of unfolds. And I'll turn it back over to Chris, but I'll be here to kind of answer questions and I'm definitely taking notes as well. So thank you.
Great. And I know there's a lot of questions earlier that I was going to have to answer. So I may need a little reminder if I miss a few of them. So as I said, we formed a internal group and an intergovernmental group to work on these issues, and the level of coordination has been very good. Currently, the water taxi is operating a very limited schedule. That's due to crew availability and frankly, very low ridership. So right now we are operating a round trip out of West Seattle at about, I think, 6:15 in the morning. Don't quote me on these times. And then a round trip to Vashon in between that route, and then another round trip to West Seattle closer to 9 o'clock. So, but we are prepared and have been planning for ramping up very quickly as demand grows. As the governor has said many times, and our county executive has said many times, it's not likely to be a switch, it's likely to be a dial as people start to go back in different groups as we move through these phases, start to come back. So right now we're operating that extremely limited COVID schedule, for lack of a better term. We our first step will likely to be to move to our regular winter schedule. So right now we have 2 round trips to West Seattle and 1 round trip to Vashon in the mornings, and then the same pair of 2 and 1 in the afternoon. The winter schedule, which would be our first step as we start to grow this service, as people start to return back to work, would be good to go to the winter schedule, and that is 6 round trips from West Seattle in the morning and in the afternoon, and 3 to Vashon in the morning and afternoon. We believe that we can ramp up very quickly when we get the word that it's okay to do that. King County Metro and King County Metro's water taxi were very much following the lead of public health on you know, when we should start returning to more full service. Right now, people are urged on both the water taxi and our bus system to only use them for essential trips only. I don't have a date for when we'll go to that full winter schedule, but we believe that once we get the clearance to do it, we can implement that very quickly. Then the next step, as people start to go back to work, would be to go to our summer schedule, which is pretty frequent sailings, about half-hour sailings all day long, and more robust weekend and evening service. Beyond that, we are definitely having conversations about how we could further enhance waterborne transit for passengers out of West Seattle. We have had conversations with private purveyors who have other boats, and have been looking with the city and other people at where available dock space is. And I'll pause here to say a few things about docks. As you heard from Washington State Ferries, dock space is very limited at Coleman Dock for auto ferries, and King County's own facility is not quite full, but with Southworth comes online, it would be pretty full. If we added more service beyond this, Kitsap may need to find another home. We're going to manage it as much as possible, but that facility does have a limit too. There are other docks on the Seattle side of the waterfront, at Argosy, at the Clipper, a few other docks on the waterfront, and we're having those conversations. One of the challenges is the limitations on dock space in West Seattle. Seacrest Dock, we could probably run as much as three passenger ferries an hour, about every 20 minutes, because it takes that long to load and unload. And even that would take some special off-board loading and Orca card stuff, you know. But beyond that, you have to look at adding some more dock capacity on the West Seattle side, of which there is not currently. We are having discussions with the port and private property owners who own dock facilities to see if there's any possibility. We're also considering, you know, whether there's a possibility of a barge that could be floated off of Seacrest to allow additional things. Boats, passenger ferry boats always need, you know, a couple things. They've got to have a dock that says the appropriate height for people to get off them. They've got to have a gangway that matches that that dock. So it's not as simple as saying bring in a boat, you know. So you really got to match the boats to the docks. And I know just enough about all this to be dangerous. So don't ask me to get too technical. But and then Fauntleroy also has challenges if you were to add passenger ferry. Once again, you have to have some kind of a passenger ferry, a dock, which there is not currently, or something that matches that boat. Anytime you're building in the water or adding new docks, and we are having conversations about long-term docks because we may be in this for a while, you have to deal with a whole bunch of waterborne regulations. You know, there's tribal issues about over the water coverage. There is fish windows you have to work around. There's you know, community involvement and process there. So so there are some challenges to adding new docks, but we are working with our team on that short-term ramp up, you know, ramping up to our regular summer service, and then looking at what we can do beyond that. As with Washington State Ferries and SDOT and everyone else, we are in the middle of a recession, or likely to head into a long recession, and funding is a challenge. So we're gonna try and be as creative as possible about how we meet this challenge. But we very much believe that transit is a huge solution to the West Seattle mobility challenges, and that waterborne transit is a key part of that. With that, I'll stop talking, and I see questions popping up everywhere. And why don't you just ask questions of Melissa and I, and we'll try and answer those as best possible.
I'll remind folks to type questions into the chat, or you know, again, if it's something really complicated and long, feel free to just sort of add yourself into the order there by saying, you know, hey, I'd like to unmute and ask a question. I'll let Kate start to look at those. One quick question while that's happening there, Chris. In terms of docks and things, have you started to have conversations with SDOT or Parks and Rec to sort of look at the possibility of taking some of the extra parking lot space that's nearby there to create perhaps a larger park and ride lot, or are you looking to maybe supplement some of that with more shuttle service to and from the dock there, since we don't have buses to the dock there?
Absolutely. That's a great question, Michael, and it tees up a couple things that I should have mentioned. So in terms of returning to our winter schedule, I forgot to mention that at that time we would also bring the shuttles to the schedule from Alki and Admiral and from the junction to match that winter schedule. And of course, and then beyond that, what we're looking at first is a lot of the things that we did during the viaduct closure, some of those the playbooks. At that time, we leased property from the port that had parking for about 200 cars down near Florida Street, where the 7-Eleven is on Alki, if that helps people understand. And ran a shuttle right just back and forth all day, so that if you parked in that lot, you usually didn't wait more than 5 or 10 minutes to get that shuttle to the dock. And we were running more frequent service. So that is something we would try and replicate. We are also having long-term conversations with the port about additional parking in that area, and also long-term conversations about, you know, is there a possibility of a dock somewhere down there in the future? But that's likely to take years to permit. So on all these things, we're really looking at them in terms of short-term, medium-term, and long-term. So.
Okay, I'll jump in with some questions from the chat. Mark is more interested in bus service, in particular areas like Admiral that don't have midday service. Also in the fall when school starts, a lot of people head to and from the U District.
Yes. So first, I think we are looking at, we've had service planners looking at the entire network, and we know that typically in Admiral, part of the reason there isn't a lot of midday service, there is some, the 50 and the 128, but there's not the direct buses that you see during the commuter hours, is because frankly, the population up there has tended to not commute outside of commuter hours. And we have to make tough choices all over the system where to allocate resources, especially now at a time where we're facing financial challenges. But we are planning on providing more robust combined service in the Alki and Admiral area. Sorry, what was the other question?
U District.
Oh,
direct
the U
service
District.
to the U District, maybe.
We have gotten a lot of calls for a special bus from West Seattle to the U District. There's some challenges with running special dedicated buses from one place to another place. The first challenge is, what is West Seattle? It's a huge peninsula. Where does that bus pick people up? Does it tool around all of West Seattle and pick everybody up in Arbor Heights, Alki, Admiral, Highland Park, you know? So that dedicated bus has some challenges in terms of things, but also it's very expensive and difficult to run dedicated buses to places. I'm not saying that we wouldn't consider a special bus to the University of Washington, but we're more likely to depend on the existing system we have and try and help people use the existing system we have. This region made an multi-billion-dollar investment in building a tunnel to the University of Washington that takes you to the University of Washington from Westlake in 8 minutes. Right now, what a lot of people don't know, and what we hope to publicize more in the coming weeks, is that now that we have the two-way Columbia pathway in downtown, all West Seattle buses will be coming on Alaskan Way north, right by Coleman Dock. So whether you take a water taxi or a bus, and there's a new bus stop pair at Western and Columbia right across the street from Coleman Dock. From there, if you're going to the University District, you would either walk or take a bus if you needed to, up to a third and catch a train to the University District. If you're going to First Hill, you would go up and catch a 3 or a 4 to First Hill, which has very frequent 5-minute service all day. If you're going to downtown Bellevue, you would walk to Second and catch a 550 that comes every 15 minutes So we're really going to try and make it intuitive and easy for people to understand the transfers, and try and make it understand how to use the system.
Okay. From Milton Horst, Arbor Heights has lost all bus service, the 21X and 22, due to COVID cuts. Can we expect at least some service to be restored when reopening moves to phase 2?
Yes, we are looking at boosting service to Arbor Heights. We realize that that's an important neighborhood to serve. I don't know the exact details of what the mix are. But we do plan on using either the 21X or the 22 to serve that neighborhood and give them at least half-hour service.
Okay. From Deb Barker, could some of the requirements that hold back action be suspended if the bridge closure were declared an emergency by the mayor or the governor?
I'm sorry, ask that again.
Deb, do you want to just pop in, Deb?
Yeah, so Chris, permits are required for blah, blah, blah. I'm a bureaucrat. I know the drill. I'm trying to think how to go faster and get things done. Could permits be suspended, waived, reduced if the bridge closure was declared an emergency at a government level?
Well,
anybody
possibly.
talked about that with all the folks that you're talking with?
We haven't gotten to the permitting part yet. We're getting to the feasibility part, and then we're going to have to talk the permitting part and the financial part. But I think there's always the possibility of permits being suspended. Some things are easier and more difficult. It's very hard to move the Coast Guard. It's very hard to move the tribes in terms of over the water coverage. All those things are are real things. But I think it's possible. I can't say because King County doesn't issue any of those permits for us.
I understand.
It's either the city or the state or the Coast Guard or whoever.
I'm just curious if that conversation had occurred to anybody at that end.
I pledge it will. I pledge it will.
Thanks.
All right. From Joel Sparrow, can a second float be added to the current water taxi dock adjacent to Coleman to add dock capacity?
Once again, all those things I said about docks and gangways and over the water coverage and are applicable, but we are looking at additional either a float off of that facility or possibly off the other side, the Pier 48 side where the Alaska Ferry used to be. So we are looking at trying to see if we can add access capacity on the Seattle waterfront, but also looking at the long-term solutions there too.
Okay. From Pete Spalding, is Metro looking at any new routes or expanded routes to circle just on the peninsula to help move folks about?
I think we are looking at all kinds of solutions and new routes. We are going to be in a financially constrained future. As many of you know, Metro is about 70% funded by sales tax and about 25% funded by fares. We haven't collected fares in 2 months. So, it's not a lot of extra cash laying around. But what we're trying to do is figure out how to make the existing network work as well as possible and try and make sure that every neighborhood has good connections. People in Arbor Heights obviously, realize that they don't have good connections. We've already identified we may have more of a midday need in the Alki and Admiral place, so we are looking at bringing back some of those buses that, that may have only commuter only service, but may have more all day service. But so mostly trying to work in the network, but we're looking at a few creative ideas too. So, and hope to be sharing those in the coming month.
Okay, I've got a question from Penny Potato, but this is not a Metro question, so I don't know if we put that off, Michael, or if somebody from Seattle could pop in. Can the lower bridge be opened up to everyone for use during off-peak hours?
So I do not work for the city of Seattle,
Yeah.
although they're lovely people.
I know we have
But-
city folks on the call, so even if they don't answer, I'm sure they are listening and hopefully making notes.
But I am part of the core team, and I think the feeling right now has been to communicate with the public the clear need to not overburden the lower bridge, which has its own challenges and maintenance needs. We really need to have a clear message that you shouldn't be using the lower bridge unless you're a bus or a truck or a first responder. I think as time goes on, you may see the city consider whether to allow more off-peak travel, but right now the simple message is the best message. And the time penalty isn't as large right now as it will be when we face those different challenges in the future. So I wouldn't say never, but maintaining the functionality of that bridge for first responders, for buses, and for freight is critical. That bridge can only carry about 20,000 people, which if it looks a day, which is compared to the 100,000 on the high bridge. So it's not going to be the answer for everybody.
I'm going to jump in for a second, Kate, with someone sent a question to me privately, which raises a really interesting issue. Do you know, Melissa or Chris or maybe other folks on the call, like, has the West Seattle Bridge closure and what's going on, has that been declared a state of emergency at all? Like, everything's been so focused on, the public health emergency, but it does seem like here at some point, wouldn't we want that to happen if it hasn't happened already? We scared Chris off. Okay.
I'm not aware that no, there's the mayors and the governor has put out lots of emergencies. I was looking it up last night, but nothing about West Seattle Bridge that I'm aware of. Anybody out there?
Yeah, I don't know what that legally means or whether that gives us more ability. We can certainly look into that question.
The mayor declared an emergency February a year ago for snowstorms. I can't recall if I saw what happened in the county, but that loosened up a lot of bidding and financial issues. That was snow, act of God, that sort of thing. But
yeah. We can look into that.
Cool.
Okay, I've got a bunch of questions. Victoria, any consideration of a shuttle from the West Seattle Junction to the light rail station?
A shuttle from the West Seattle Junction to the light rail station. That's another case where it is challenging. So the light rail station I'm assuming you're referring to is SODO, which is the closest one to us. Once again, the challenge with shuttles is where do they come from in West Seattle and where do they go to? And one of the challenges with bringing more service to SODO, which we do have service via the Route 50 to the SODO station.
The Route 50 does not work for a lot of people, so that's not a good route for a lot.
Yeah, I understand that. No bus works for every person. What I would say is that the more likely transfer, if you want to access rail, is to simply take one of the many frequent West Seattle buses we have, the 120, the C line, all our other buses, which all go to downtown and go to 3rd Avenue and get on light rail there. One of the challenges with SODO is from the south are at their fullest point at SODO. So adding more capacity at SODO can overload the train system. So it's much better for those people to get on at University Street or Pioneer Square, which are both pretty close to where the buses come in. So So we have to make sure that all the plumbing works together, if that makes sense.
Can I pop in with a question? I'm curious how
Yes,
buses
you
are
may.
moving. Like, aren't buses moving well? Are they comparable to before times?
We have had very little time penalty during this COVID period because the entire city is virtual bus lane, you know? So anytime they add coming out of West Seattle, they get it back as they head into downtown.
So the detour isn't adding time in
sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. If the lower bridge opens for a boat, then obviously that's going to cause it a delay. But we have not been seeing major delays in the buses during this stay-at-home period.
Okay, how do we address the passenger load restriction on coaches with the increasing commuter numbers sure to come?
Well, that's a big challenge that keeps us all up at night every night. That is, all of that's dependent on public health situations. How many people are wearing masks? Are they all wearing masks? Do we get to a point where public health feels that we can relax some of those social distancing things? Right now, our buses are restricted to 12 people on a 40-foot bus and 18 people on a 60-foot articulated bus. And we also have restrictions on how many passengers can be on the water taxis. But, hopefully we will progress to a point where we can relax that. In all of our planning, we're really looking at what we can carry given social distancing, what we can carry if that social distancing was relaxed by maybe, another third, or what we could carry at full capacity. So we're trying to look at all this in the lens of public health.
Okay. From John Wright, one idea that has come up is creating a reverse park and ride where people could leave a vehicle on the east side of the Duwamish. Any consideration to that notion?
That is something that has come up and is being considered by the under-jurisdictional team.
Okay, from Mark, he's suggesting
Kate?
feeder buses to light rail. Yes.
And I see our board member Victoria has a question when we get a moment.
Okay.
And then I'll just quickly say, as someone who has done the bus a couple of times in the last couple of weeks, we're flying in and out faster than ever before. So it's great for me.
I guess I'm really curious about what that is anticipated to be when traffic levels are up. Is it still clear sailing for the bus? I mean, it's not on the bridge. It's not on 99, right? Oh, no, it does get on 99. Yeah. Okay. Let's see. Victoria, why don't you pop in?
I just wanted to clarify my question. Chris, you were mentioning the buses can get you close to a light rail station, but they also have stops along the way. I'm wondering about, you get to the junction and then it's a straight shot to the light rail station. There are no stops in between. So people have a much quicker access to the light rail station.
Uh-oh. Did we lose Chris?
Did we lose Chris? Uh-oh. I think we may have lost Chris. Well, let's we'll give it a moment to see if he pops back in.
But in the meantime, I will say that I'm taking notes, so I have that, and I will make sure that the team that's working on the different ideas has that. So
yeah, I still think areas of West Seattle. I live up in Admiral, and Chris was talking about, well, midday wasn't used that much. Well, before you just get in your car and pop across the bridge and you get to where you want to go. That option's no longer going to be available. And for those of us in the north end of Admiral, proximity to the bridge was one of the reasons a lot of us bought here, to get easy access. We don't get that anymore. If we don't get bus service, we're stranded up here and we're paying a lot of taxes. And I expect the city and the county to provide that midday bus service to serve West Seattle and all of us that don't have good access to this downtown core like we used to because the city failed to maintain the bridge. I mean, if the city's got money to pay for free bus passes for other people, they got money to buy for added service to serve West Seattle. I'm really pissed off at what's going on right now because I feel like the city failed to maintain the bridge. Now they're not providing, alternatives that are going to work. Oh, we're going to penalize you for using the low level bridge, but give us alternatives that work. And I still have not heard those yet. Everybody talks about the water taxi. The water taxi is nice, but that's not going to solve the problem. Changing what ferry routes is nice. It's not going to solve the problem. The only thing that can really mitigate it is flooding West Seattle with more buses.
Thank you, Mark.
I'm sorry.
And Melissa, I think you're aware of this, but one thing Mark highlights is even if we were at normal bus service right now, Admiral and Arbor Heights are two particular edges of West Seattle that really service had been cut back on in recent years, and we haven't been able to sort of get that back. And now with the demand, those seem to be two key areas we want to look at. How do we bring back service to meet the needs that are going to be there now with the bridge out?
Definitely.
Kate, what else do we have? We got about 5 minutes.
The final comment in the chat is not really metro related. From MSW, could Michael reiterate how colossal it is to change routes and add routes and trips with Washington State Ferries and the water taxi? As crew, we're always amazed how people often think we could just flick a switch or change the boat's course. It's a huge interconnected system and we're federally regulated by CFRs, etc. Think of a mobile, think of a mobile. Now clip one string, it all becomes a mess. So. And is that, we'll see if Chris is back.
Yeah, I wonder if that phone coming in is Chris. At any rate, I am going to pause here. And once again, I'm going to go through and unmute those who are just on the telephone. So again, be aware if you're on the phone and there's a lot of noise, I'm going to kind of come through here for a sec.
Hi, everybody.
Unmute those. So if anyone on the phone has a question or an issue or a comment they need to raise right now. Chris, did we get you back on the phone?
This is Chris Arkills on the phone. I temporarily don't have internet. I think the internet pipes were attached to the high-level bridge, so I don't know. Anyway, sorry. So you don't get to see my beautiful face anymore, but I am on the phone. Happy to answer any more questions. Sorry about the logistical problems.
All right. Anybody else there on the phones who wants to ask a question? All right. In that case, I'm going to mute everyone here. Folks will have the opportunity to unmute themselves. And then, did I just undo the right one? Chris, are you there?
I am.
Okay, good. I unmuted the right one. So Chris is unmuted again. If anyone has any last things to add in the chat or wants to electronically raise their hand to get called on, it looks like something came in there, Kate, on the chat. Oh, we need to unmute.
Yeah,
Kate,
sorry, I guess. It looks like it's mostly discussion. I managed to poach John's question about has Metro done any modeling to predict travel times once traffic across the Duwamish approaches normal? So.
The city would be doing that modeling, not Metro, because our buses, depend on the street system, but yes, the city is looking at modeling, and you may have seen that on several corridors they've installed monitors to give them more accurate traffic counts. So we are trying to get better information coming out of West Seattle.
What's the chance of bringing back the 133 from Shag to the U District?
Well, I would say, I know that's a pet bus for you, Marty, but I would say that a dedicated bus from one place in West Seattle to the U District is probably not as probable as boosting up the entire system to get people to the U District.
I'll ask one final question, Chris. I know for a while there was a pilot, and then I think we officially opened it up. You could probably provide more details from Metro, but is Metro looking at sort of expanding or reaching out to employers to allow, as things start to come back, allow some of the employer shuttles or perhaps some of the access shuttles, not Metro Access, but like Harborview or some of the other sort of smaller ones that are geared towards service for older adults, allowing those to use Metro facilities to stop and pick up people, and sort of allow the private sector to create their own shuttles to get people directly to other areas that Metro doesn't run to.
Yeah, so Metro has always partnered with private shuttles. Currently, even pre-COVID, we allowed private shuttles to use many of our bus stops to pick people up, but we tried to coordinate with them. So if you, for example, if you wanted to have a private shuttle, we've got too many buses at 35th and Avalon or at the West Seattle Junction to allow private shuttles to wait to pick up people in those spots. So we usually try and direct them to have their private shuttles pick up at a stop that's less busy a block away. So we're always happy to partner with private shuttles, and they can be part of the solution.
All right, and with that, we're at time. So again, I want to thank our guest Chris Arkills from King County Metro and Melissa Bailey from King County Council Member Joe McDermott's office. Hopefully you're seeing slides on the screen. Again, at the bottom there, folks can learn more. Really, it's just go to kingcounty.gov and look for Transportation Department. But Metro and water taxi. We also didn't talk about van pools and some of the other options that are available.
We are looking at ramping up van pools too, and feel free to email either Melissa or I, and we will make sure that you get some answers to your questions.
All right, thank you very much. So looking back at our agenda, so folks, those are our key issues. This is very quickly as we go through the last 25 minutes here. We're going to talk very quickly now about West Seattle Bridge Community Task Force and Technical Advisory Panel. We have Deb Barker, who's a board member with West Seattle Transportation Coalition, who's going to speak a little bit. I added very quickly, I noticed that Marcy Carpenter and Laura Radford are on the call. Just like I did with some other folks, please do not feel put on the spot and like you have to talk or share. But I did want to acknowledge that we saw you on the call, and you are local folks here who are on the community task force, and invite you that if you do have things you'd like to add as invited members, please feel free to join Deb in doing so. And with that, I'll turn it over to Deb.
Hi, everybody. So what's crazy is just, it's only been a month since the WSTC had kind of the first West Seattle what the heck's going on meeting with SDOT, and how many meetings have they participated in since then, and how many meetings have a lot of us participated in since then. I just wrote a few notes out for what I'm aware of with the task force, and I wanted to give just a quick update on my personal goal and two other things that I've been working on. But the West Seattle Transportation Coalition, on April 2nd, we submitted a letter to SDOT. That was kind of the first letter. We also didn't think that it was appropriate to do it on April 1st. So we picked April 2nd and got our letter out to SDOT, lots of points. And SDOT came back and responded to us on April 23rd when they attended the last WestsideSeattle Transportation Coalition meeting. Since then, WSTC has kind of been working in consultation coordination with the District 1 Community Network. And between that, there's been an effort to gather up the letters that have gone to SDOT from the affected communities in D1. WestsideSeattle Bike Connections, Highland Park Action Committee, South Park Community Councils, Morgan Community Association, Water Taxi Resumption Inquiry, and also Fauntleroy Community Association. So all these folks have written to SDOT with issues, and we, with the WestsideSeattle Transportation Coalition and with the D1CN, we didn't want everybody operating in isolation. We're all of WestsideSeattle is in this together, and we want to all be on the same page and working for WestsideSeattle. I'm pretty excited to be on this advisory committee. I was thinking that if there wasn't one formed, that WestsideSeattle Transportation should form one, but the mayor jumped in and did that, so that's great. There are, this is co-chaired by Mayor Nichols and Paulina Lopez, and I was excited to look at the list of members of this advisory committee and go like, wow, I know I worked with a bunch of these people, whether it was on the Sound Transit Stakeholder Advisory Group, other different places in my my life. So it feels great to be working again with Marcy and to continuing to work with Laura. I have a personal goal right now. Oh, before I get to that, our first meeting that we've been told is June, the week of June 8th. So not next week, but the week after. And they have set some targets for this group to take care of. They haven't really disclosed all those yet. But we'll be meeting virtually several times in June. They're trying to get decisions out of us. Bill the board, who we know at Transportation Coalition, and Diane Wiatar, W-I-A-T-R, are the co-leads of the, there are our go-to people, I guess, at SDOT. So stay tuned. Like I said, I do have a personal goal that I really want to have the WestsideSeattle Bridge closure period, however long it's going to be. I want it declared an emergency so that we can expedite mitigation, raise the profile, get funding to deal with a lot of this, and confirm that we are in this all together. It's not just D1, but the entire city needs to acknowledge that WestsideSeattle is in a world of hurt right now. Two things that I just wanted to share real quick that actually I'm going to wait. I'm going to hold off on that. I'll share them later on. So any questions? Or Victoria, someone, I can't do this. Just unmute yourself. And
while folks are doing that, I'm sharing on the screen the long list of folks who are part of the community group.
There's 21 members on the committee and 10 electeds. And yeah, I'm glad to see that it's such a broad representation, because this issue deals from the Puget Sound all the way to I-5. It covers beyond D1. It's a big issue from Soto on down. So it's good to see everybody there.
Deb, do you have any idea of the scope of your responsibilities on this task force yet?
I haven't seen anything that gets into that weed stuff.
I was just curious when they reached out to you to participate, whether they gave you an overview.
the person who reached out to me was, didn't know much about, couldn't say how many meetings or anything like that. It sounded that they were all putting everything together pretty quick. So, to be determined. What about Marcy or Laura? Did you hear anything different?
This is Marcy, and I haven't heard anything other than what you have, Deb. And I just want to say also that I'm really honored to be a part of this community group and to representing a lot of different interests in West Seattle and beyond. And I also agree with Deb with your goal of getting this declared an emergency to try to, so we can try to step up mitigation.
Yeah. Marcy was one of the original West Seattle Transportation Coalition board members, and it's great to be working with you again, Marcy. We've missed you.
Yeah.
Laura, are you still on? Maybe not. Any other questions?
Crystal wrote in the chat, is Deb the only transportation-focused community member on the list?
I'm the only one from West Seattle Transportation Coalition. I think
I'll pop in too.
I can't really speak for others.
Yeah, I was personally surprised that there was nobody from the bike community or the Safe Streets community. Business is well represented, and
business is, and I was surprised Highland Park isn't even represented on here.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if it was a complete list. So you got runners.
I have heard that there may be one or two other people who have not confirmed yet.
I heard that too.
Well,
so that may be why we're missing. I dropped a link in the chat window there to SDOT's blog that has the lists of members. Scanning down, you know, Deb, Marcy, and other than that, I'm not seeing.
Well,
we have Amanda Kirk from West Seattle Bridge now, who's, you know, she's really more of a neighborhood person.
She's also a realtor.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm not seeing a whole lot of other transportation folks, but there's a good balance of community council, business association. It is very nice to see the Duwamish Longhouse and Cultural Center represented, as well as having it literally being co-chaired by someone by Paulina from the Duwamish River Cleanup Coalition.
Yeah, I'm just hoping that you can be our voice for the bike community if we're passed up. Thank you.
Absolutely. I'm surprised as I was going through this and it's like, but I don't think it's the final list.
Maybe that's a note for you and Marcy that you know, are they looking at someone from Highland Park? Are they looking at someone from the bicycle community, because those do seem to stand out?
Or Seattle Neighborhood Greenways, as Crystal noted in the chat, there would work as well for bike community.
I've got to return a call tomorrow morning to the person who reached out to me, and I will bring these up with her then.
Thank you.
I'll get it to the answer to John, and John can get that out to however we do that.
And just to add, I think it was in my credentials, but one of the reasons that I was also appointed was that I was on the original Seattle Transit Advisory Board after our Prop 1 passed in 2014 and chaired that body for several years. So I'm definitely a transit advocate and also for other modes. So we'll definitely carry those concerns. And I know they said there were some people who hadn't confirmed yet. So I'm expecting there will be more.
Great.
Can I go ahead? Do we have time for me just to disclose two things, Michael?
Very quickly, yes.
Okay. Because I'm really worried about how everything is going to turn out during the time the West Seattle Bridge is closed, given that it's not an emergency yet to many people, I have personally filed a comprehensive plan amendment with the city regarding the West Seattle Bridge and mitigation. On Friday, May 15th at 10 o'clock in the morning, I got an email from someone saying, hey, comp plan amendment deadline 5 o'clock today. And I thought, okay, write it, Deb. So that's in, and I don't know where that's going to go. Comp plan amendments don't take, they take a while. They take a year or more, but I wanted it, the bridge closure issue to be elevated in ways that me as a planner know how. Also, then last Thursday, I filed an appeal on a land use decision in the West Seattle Junction because the conditions of the transportation report, with the bridge closed, the conditions have changed and no mitigation was identified for this project. There was a 6-week gap between the bridge closure and this project decision being issued. And I think that it's incumbent upon SDCI to be aware that things are not normal, whether it's the new normal, we don't like that. Things are not the same in West Seattle, and SDCI needs to pay attention to that. So those are things that I personally have done, and I'm glad to talk to anybody offline about that.
You need co-filers on that. Like if West Seattle Transportation Coalition added its name to your appeal, with that?
Well, the appeal was written under D1CN, and again, all this happened so quickly. I didn't have time to get to meetings between the time that the land use decision was issued and the appeal deadline, and waiting for SDCI directors to comment about would they rescind a decision. So I kind of jumped in, and it's written for D1CN. I'm the agent, and then if D1CN disagrees with having this appeal filed, I'll figure out what's next. But I don't know, I'm not an attorney, so maybe friendly amendments or friendly, yeah, we support that. It's just, I want the conversations to happen at a higher level. And that's why I took these actions.
Okay.
All right, I'm going to keep us moving here since we've
I'm
got
done.
about 10 more minutes. I shared in the chat our email address, info@westseattletc.org. This was a good bridge, though, across our old business, new business. So
Yeah,
thanks,
that was
Deb, for sharing that. You'll see on the screen there, donations with a question mark. So just a reminder to folks, again, if you're not familiar with us, we are an all volunteer board. We're not being funded by any agencies or community groups or anything. We don't currently charge folks to be members. So if you think we're providing a valuable service, we do have some small expenses we pick up during the year, such as costs for these Zoom calls. So if you feel like you've been learning things and you're glad we're here representing you, feel free to reach out to us at our email address if there are things that you'd like to do to support, as well as we're always looking for new board members. We're currently a little lacking in a couple of different neighborhoods, as well as we're lacking some good business representation. So if you think that's a voice that you didn't hear really well represented tonight, or people who might be interested in getting involved, especially as we move forward here with West Seattle Bridge closure and Rapid Ride H construction, and we'll be hearing more about light rail next year and what the impacts are, the economy on that. This is a good spot to help represent those voices that we're lacking a little bit right now. And then wrapping up with our new business, unless folks have other things to bring up, I promised I'd mention that the Lower Spokane Street Bridge is closing at various points this weekend. I'm going to try to, instead of getting people to absorb that really long address there, I'm going to try to carefully transition here on the screen to to share here. Hopefully folks can see the SDOT blog. Travel alert, West Seattle Low Bridge, there's maintenance scheduled for this weekend. So if you've heard, Chris kind of hinted at it and some of the others, like, you know, a lot of folks say, why don't we just open the lower bridge off peak or you know, allow more people to clear through. And I don't think what's out there enough in the neighborhood is folks understanding that, you know, not only are there maintenance concerns on the high bridge, but we've had some long time maintenance concerns with the low bridge. And it generally only has a capacity, as Chris said, of you know, averaging about 20,000 vehicles per day. And so they're really pushing to get some of that backlog maintenance done. And so they are looking at a whole bunch of work starting, let's see here, starting Friday at 8 p.m., going all the way till 5 a.m. on Saturday. Then on Saturday and Sunday, those nighttime closures kick in at 6 p.m. So I know the Seattle Bike Blog has really been trying to get this information out there because this is potentially a huge impact. A lot of the bicyclists, this is really one of the safer routes since most vehicles aren't going that way, especially on the weekend where there may be fewer trucks. You know, this is generally one of the safer routes. People are getting out and exercising more as it gets warmer. And as much as it is an impact to folks when we're in cars that have to route further south to head over other bridges, it's that much more of literally a expense of energy and time for folks on bikes when they have to reroute. So we definitely want to make sure folks are aware. These are just nighttime closures, but again, in particular, Saturday and Sunday, those closures of the low bridge are starting at 6 p.m. And so we don't want folks getting caught over on the other side and not being aware that they too are going to have to now route to those other detours to the south, because the lower bridge will be closed to bikes as well as other issues. I don't know what kind of maintenance. I don't think it called out in the blog as to whether they would have the ability, you know, to pause any work and send an emergency vehicle across if it was needed. But I'll use that as a plug to also point out that SPD and Seattle Police Department and the Seattle Fire Department have been looking at how to rearrange some of their resources, and with the help of Council Member Lisa Herbold and the Mayor's Office, the Fire Department has been moving additional resources to stage over here, being aware that we can't as easily send them across from downtown and SoDo and other parts of Seattle. So that's all I've got there. I will stop sharing.
I've got one thing.
All right, go Deb.
I just need to let folks know that Different Hat that I wear is a stakeholder advisory group for Sound Transit 3. Today I had a conversation with a new outreach person, Sound Transit 3 outreach person for West Seattle. This fellow's name is Zach Ambrose, and he's been with other Sound Transit lines previously, but Sound Transit, if you may recall, back in October, the Sound Transit Board asked to have yet another line drawn on a map, and the neighborhoods that that line runs through are needing to become aware of what their future may hold. So I've asked Zach Ambrose to meet with them. And so if you know of anyone who's in between Avalon and the Fauntleroy Bridge on-ramp to the West Seattle Bridge, that 32nd Avenue corridor, I'm trying to hook people up so that they can get information as soon as possible from Sound Transit about what the heck this Yancey line will mean to them. So just a heads up.
Thank you, Deb. As we're wrapping up here, I will remind folks we have been recording this meeting. As soon as that gets all handled on the back end by Zoom, we'll post that on Facebook. I know we have a couple of media folks who are on the call. If for some reason you would like to get the PowerPoint, if you want to get that link as soon as I have it available to the video, if you have any information needs about clarifying names or spellings or titles of any of the speakers we've had tonight, just feel free to email us at that info@westsiattletc.org email address. That's over there in the chat. I'll be happy to get those to you as soon as possible. In case you need to meet any deadlines. Any other board members or anyone have any additional new business? Otherwise, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Adjourn.
All right, thank you very much to everyone, and we hope to see you again next month in this new Zoom environment we all live in.
Thanks everybody for
I
coming.
hope that we're not going to be in the Zoom environment soon enough. That means things are getting better, right?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Thanks, everyone.
Zoom.